Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Salam sejahtera, selamat siang bagi kita semua. Warm greetings to all participants joining us from Indonesia, Malaysia, and also other countries and beyond. Welcome to the cross-country learning webinar centering women's perspective in just energy transition, insights from Indonesia and Malaysia. My name is Febda. I'm from Asosiasi LBH Apik Indonesia, and today I'm honored to be your Master of Ceremony for this important webinar. Before we begin, allow me to share a few quick technical guidelines to ensure that our webinar will run smoothly. I will share it in Indonesian. Bagi Ibu dan Bapak dan kakak-kakak semua yang hadir dalam webinar pada siang hari ini, silahkan untuk mengganti nama menjadi dengan format nama dan asal organisasi atau lembaga. Selanjutnya akan ada daftar hadir yang silahkan untuk diisi bersama-sama, akan dibagikan di kolom komentar, dan selama webinar berlangsung, sesi ini akan dilaksanakan dalam bahasa Inggris, sehingga nanti bagi Ibu, Bapak, dan Kakak sekalian yang akan mendengarkan dalam bahasa Indonesia, bisa klik icon bola dunia yang ada di bawah layar Bapak Ibu semuanya, dan lalu memilih opsi Indonesian untuk mendengarkan dalam bahasa Indonesia. And for friends who attend this webinar today, I would like to ask you to rename your name by format name_institution. And also there is a attendance form, and please to ensure that you fill the attendance form through the links we shared on the comment section. And also during the event, there is the live translation is available if you click on the globe icon under your screen. You can choose the English option or Indonesian. Now to formally open today's webinar, I would like to invite Ms. Nursyahbani Kacasungkana, the Chair of Board of Asosiasi LBH Apik Indonesia, to give some speech. And to Ms. Nursyahbani, the screen is yours.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, clear, Ibu Nur.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Febda, for the opportunity to present my opening remarks to this very important webinar. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, and my dear friends. As the chairman of the board of the director of Indonesian Legal Aid Association for Women, usually it is called APIC, I warmly welcome all of you to the webinar Cross-Country Learning, Centering Women's Perspective in Just Energy Transition, Insight from Indonesia and Malaysia. First of all, on behalf of APIC, I would like to express my gratitude to Oxfam and all partners involved in this webinar. Also to the Asia Feminist Coalition and Women for Justice Energy Transition Network, of which APIC is a member. I also extend my gratitude to APIC's long-standing partner, Kalyana Mitra, as well as to the Climate Action Malaysia, Youth Force Indonesia 2030, and Oxfam in Asia. This collaboration between civil society from various regions and countries, especially the sisterhood in Asia that we have, is very important, because it is clear that the issue of energy transition is a big issue that needs to be discussed, and that the responsibility needs to be shared among us as community and as nation, especially as ASEAN countries. This webinar on learning processes is very timely and important for APIC, since we have only recently started to pay attention to the issue of gender and energy transition. We are very much absorbed in the issue of discrimination and violence against women and children, which has really drained our energy. However, we are fully aware that the issue of climate change and the transition energy could not be ignored, because it has a great impact on the life of women and children. As you may know, since 90s, the world attention has begun to shift to the issue of climate change. As stated in the COP27 in 2022, the impact of climate change we have witnessed so far reinforces and even exacerbates the already existing gender gaps. Women's, youth, and marginalized community are disproportionately impacted by climate change, and hence bear to the brunt of inaction and often have no space or voice to participate in, lead, and benefit from the energy transition. Human activities such as the use of fossil fuel, carbon emission, deforestation, and other environmental damage have changed the climate and daily life, prompting the global communities to seek cleaner energy. We all realize that energy is an inherent need in people's daily lives, both to support domestic and public activities and for paid and unpaid care work. We are also increasingly being aware that there are both cross-cutting issues between nation and context-specific issues. Hence, it is crucial to compare condition and progress in two large neighboring countries such as Indonesia and Malaysia. Related to the low knowledge of the public, especially women, about energy issues and or energy transition that we will talk about today, a lot of attention must be paid to awareness building. Studies show that gender perspectives are often absent from climate change energy policies, and we suspect the same is true in the context of energy transition. What came out strongly from our last discussion in the National Seminar on Gender and Energy Transition here in Jakarta was the intersectionality of gender equality with SDGs, especially SDGs 5, gender equality, SDGs 7, universal access to energy, SDGs 13, climate action, SDGs 2, food security, SDGs 6, clean water and sanitation. The limitation and that financial mechanism pose to the full participation of women and girls in the energy transition, the importance of access to resources to support equality and inclusion, and the critical need for multilateral partnership and commitment at the local, national, and regional level to ensure a just and equitable energy transition. All those issues demonstrate the need to include women at all levels, from sustainability farmers, entrepreneurs, to policy makers and partners for climate action. The Just Energy Transition Partnership is a global initiative to help developing countries transition to low carbon economies through renewable energy investment. ASEAN alone needs an investment of 180 billion US dollar per year until this year, 2025, to achieve the renewable energy target. The GETP is based on 4 principles of justice: right-based, procedural justice, fair distribution, and restorative justice, which emphasize the importance of fairness in processes and outcomes without discrimination on any basis, including gender, race, or disability. Energy transition projects have a direct impact on society, especially on women and vulnerable groups. The land and natural resources used in this project are vital to people's livelihood, such as water, food, and shelter. In situations of natural resources crisis, conflict, or other disaster, women and girls face multiple risks, including gender-based discrimination and violence. There are many important issues that need to be discussed in this webinar. Are energy transition projects really clean and fair? Are women already involved and do they benefit equally? Have women's perspective, experiences, and initiative been recognized and supported? Ultimately, has renewable energy policy fulfilled the main mandate of all nations to materialize social, gender, and ecological justice? For this reason, the concept of just energy transition is becoming increasingly important. This approach aims not only to reduce carbon emission and promote clean energy for environmental sustainability, but also to ensure that the transition is inclusive, equitable, and leaves no one behind, especially women and marginalized groups. Thank you very much for your kind attention, and I wish you a happy and productive webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Nur Syahbani, for the wonderful and inspiring speech. And now we would also like to invite Ms. Alia Piska, the Head of Business Operation of Oxfam in Indonesia, to deliver the speech. To Ms. Alia, the screen is yours.
Selamat siang, apa terdengar?
Terdengar dengan jelas, Mbak Alia.
Halo, selamat siang.
Iya, selamat siang, terdengar dengan jelas?
Terdengar?
Terdengar.
Oke. Mohon maaf ada technical problem. So good afternoon all. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of this webinar of Centering Women's Perspective in Just Energy Transitions, Insight from Indonesia and Malaysia, coordinated by Asosiasi LBH APIK Indonesia, kalian mitra also Climate Action Malaysia. So also special thank you also to Ibu Nur Syahbani Kaca Sungkana, the Chairboard of Asosiasi LBH APIK Indonesia. Today we are brought together by a shared purpose to explore how countries are addressing one of the most urgent challenges our time, that is climate change, while ensuring that the solutions we build are inclusive, equitable, and empowering, particularly for women. As we move toward more sustainable and also low carbon energy systems, it is critical that we also confront long-standing gender disparities in access, participations, and leadership. The transition to clean energy must not only be just in economic and environmental terms, but also in social and gender terms. Over the course of this webinar today, we will hear from researchers and representatives from Indonesia and Malaysia and also across Asia who will share their recent findings on how gender perspectives are or are not being integrated into just energy transitions, policies, planning, and also financing mechanism. Oxfam Indonesia through Fair Finance Asia program in partnership with Women's for Jet Coalition led by Asosiasi LBH Apik Indonesia has conducted a series of activities to empower women rights organizations and its disabled people organizations to play more active role in the discourse making and influencing urgent energy transition issues. We aim to strengthen gender transformative approach in the energy transition through research, campaign, and advocacy works to ensure women are being meaningful engaged, not just beneficiaries, but as a leaders and decision makers in energy transitions. By fostering this cross-country dialogue, we do hope that to inspire new ideas, strengthen partnership, and also co-create practical policy recommendations and support both our climate goals and our commitment to gender equality. So without further ado, let us seize the opportunity to listen, to learn, and lead together towards a more inclusive and sustainable energy future for all. Thank you and happy Saturday to all of you.
Okay, thank you, Miss Alia, for the wonderful and also insightful speech. And now, to guide us through the rest of today's discussion, I am happy to introduce our moderator, Ramadana Afida Rahman from Youth Force Indonesia 2030, and who will lead this webinar. Without further ado, I hand the session over to you, Afida. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Kak Febda. Okay, is everyone can hear me clearly?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you, Kak Febda. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on centering women's perspective in just energy transition, insight from Indonesia and Malaysia. My name is Afida, and I'm honored to serve you as your moderator today on behalf of 2030 Youth Force Indonesia and a part of Asia Feminist Coalition. Thank you for joining us, everyone. Your presence is very much appreciated in this webinar. Okay, so our today discussion will explore on how a just energy transition can and must not only be environmentally sound but also adopt gender equality, disability, and social inclusion values. We want the business sides, government, and every party that involved in just energy transition project, ensuring that women and marginalized communities are protected and empowered in journey toward renewable and sustainable energy resources. Before we begin, let me have a brief overview of our agenda today. So, we will hear the presentations by the expert speakers from Indonesia, Malaysia, and also we will have representation from Asia Feminist Coalition. Each speaker will have about 20 minutes to give the presentations. Please take a note of that. And following that, we will have a Q&A session where you are encouraged, the attendees, to share your thoughts and questions. You can use the Q&A box down below to give the questions for the speaker. So, and in the end, I will conclude with some closing remarks. Before we begin the discussion today, I kindly ask everyone to keep the microphones mute during the sessions. If you have any questions or maybe some troubles during the session, you can check the chat in the column chat. There is like WhatsApp number that you can contact if you have any technical issues in this session. And for those who have questions, don't forget to just give your question in the Q&A box. And we will address those questions during our Q&A session later on. And now, let's start our discussion today. Our first segment of Today's sessions will focus on the situation of women amid the energy transition here in Indonesia and what just really means in this context in energy transition. We will hear from Ibu Khotimun Susanti as Executive Coordinator of Asosiasi LBH APIK Indonesia, and following by Ibu Ika Agustina as a Director of Kalyana Mitra. LBH APIK and Kalyana Mitra are both organizations that based in Indonesia, which APIK has focused work on legal aid for women, policy reform, and legal empowerment for women and marginalized groups, as well as promoting gender equality in various topics. Currently, they have 18 APIK legal aid offices in Indonesia. Wow, such a great work, right? And we also have Kalyana Mitra here. Kalyana Mitra is a feminist organization founded in 1985. Kalyana Mitra works toward realizing a gender-just social and political system guided by principles of care and solidarity. Both APIK and Kalyana Mitra have directly researched and engaged in just energy transition, or we know as GET issues in Indonesia. So now, let's hear the presentation from Mbak Khotimun and Mbak Ika. Mbak Khotimun and Mbak Ika, the screen is yours.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Afida. So my voice clear? Hello? Hello?
Yes, Mbak, the voice is clear. You can continue.
Is it my voice clear?
Yep, it is indeed.
Oh, yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. Sorry, because some internet problem of internet connection here. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm truly excited to be here with all of you today. So this is a wonderful opportunity for us to come together, and also my friend Nadia. We also a member of Asia Feminist Coalition, yeah, and also Mira from Oxfam ASEAN, also Asia Feminist Coalition, and all of you, the attendees here, the participants here, we can share together about our experience, yeah, and perspective about what is just energy transition means, especially from a woman's point of view. So I think it is a chance for mutual learning between Indonesia and Malaysia. But of course, if you joining from other countries, you also warmly welcome your insight as well. So let's learn each other and build solidarity. So I'm Khotimun Sutanti, as Afida said, yeah, as moderator from Indonesia Women Association for Justice, or APIK, or LBH APIK, Legal Aid for Women. Today, with Ika Agustina from Kalyana Mitra, we will begin to talk about a just narrative on energy transition from women's experience by presenting key findings of our field study. So we begin our discuss here today with our finding from field study, but I know that it's not represent all of the problem or of the challenge or lesson learned from the woman's perspective in Indonesia related to energy transition, but this is one of the sample, yeah, that we can use it. So our field study on how women's situation in the surrounding energy transition project, specifically in the case of the Blawan Ijen geothermal power plant in East Java province, Indonesia. So this research focusing to center women experience and perspective, which are often left out mainstream energy discussion. So in addition of our field study, LBH APIK and Kalyana Mitra, we also collaborated with Herni and Dwi that become the next that will become the next speaker, yeah, in this webinar. So both members of a Women's Forget Coalition along with Prakarsa Foundation, yeah, to conduct a research on gender perspective in just energy transition partnership financing. So Dwi will focusing on gender and financing in from the lesson in Indonesia, yeah. So I will begin. So can you help me to, yeah, sorry, it is okay, this is the second slide. So why it is important to talk about a just narrative of energy transition in Indonesia and also in the world, and why it is important also we should like voice from the woman, especially in the grassroots level. So, clean energy, we know that clean energy is a right for all citizens, including women, not just like a commodity and so on and so on. So the just energy transition commits to principles such as human right, gender equality, and accountability. However, in practice, political dynamics and socially constructed gender inequalities are often place women at a greater risk than other group. Yeah, both as a user of energy, as a user, or as a community or group that living near the energy transition project. For example, also some of the extractive industry, yeah, that also profit product to support the energy transition project. The raises this crucial question. This is a crucial question. Yeah, are these rights really being fulfilled? Are women equally included and benefiting in this transition? So the lesson learned from this study offer a valuable contribution to building a truly just and international narrative, one that places women's voice, experience, realities at the center. So I will present about the overview of this case study. So we focusing on the Belawan Ijen Geothermal project. So this is the only just energy transition partnership funded project in Indonesia. Yeah, but today, as I know, it's two project, but this Belawan Ijen Geothermal project is the only the first and only when we were conducting the research. So this Belawan geothermal project actually it developed since 2011, but it's funded by GETP commitment. It's introduced in 2023, so it's about 1 or 2 years. So this project now entered a small-scale trial production phase with full-scale operation planned for mid-2025. It is a massive development, yeah, involving 2,800 hectares of land, and primarily under the control of state-owned enterprise. So this project in the area that the land primarily under the control state-owned enterprise, but many people live there. So and also women since the colonial era. So this is some power dynamic there that also influence the situation of a woman and also villagers to it's like a bargaining position and to voice their perspective and also maybe problem and also power dynamic in the dispute resolution. So most of villagers are farmers and many live there since colonial era, as we explained. So the total population, maybe you can write there, it's 5,000 until 6,000. Yeah, 5,000 women and 6,000 men. So mostly depend on agriculture for their livelihood. Especially they plant cabbage and potatoes, but some of them also in the different time they also as laborers in a perhutani and plantation. Perhutani is a state-owned enterprise that have a massive business in a coffee plant. So we found some media report before that this community have faced a number of environmental challenges associated with this geothermal project, including water pollution, land conversion dispute, recurring explosions, and then smoke pollution. And one of the study also conducted before our study, but not focusing on gender. It was conducted by Celios, one of the research organization institution in Indonesia, with different topics. But the data is very important for us, so we also reference some of data from Celios. So this is qualitative research, the data collection through focus group discussion and in-depth interview with approximately 41 villagers, and more than 70% are women in the village in Ijen surrounding geothermal project. So the closer village from the geothermal project is about 300 until 500 meters. Yeah, so it's very close. So this research, we conducted this research during October 2024 to February 2025. So they study an FGD and in-depth interview there. So this research, we use a feminist lens, yeah, to assess the four justice principles: recognition, procedural, distribution, and also remedial justice. So we use these four justice principles to analyze the how the project of energy transition run until today, yeah, especially this in this area. So feminist principle means we exploring women's experience and perspective, including various form of gender-based discrimination and violence experience in the context of energy transition. So, okay, maybe I would like to offer to Ika from Kalyana Mitra to share about our key finding, yeah, from this research. So offer to you, Ika, to explain that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Imun. I hope you all can hear me clearly. So I will proceed to continue to present the key findings of our field study. So based on our study and based on our collected data, we analyzed that there are 5 key findings from this field study. The first one is inequality in access to information and participation. So women have minimal access to information about the geothermal power plant project, and usually only men who are invited and gathered for this geothermal project socialization, and as they also still considered as family representation. As we also know, as we also know that that is the socially constructed in our society. And most of women only found out after the construction of project had started. For example, after they know and they see the vehicles passing by carrying the heavy equipment. And also women do not receive information about the risks, dangers about the project, as well as the risk about the environment, the risk to the health, the land conversion, livelihood, water, and etc. And this impacted and this minimal access to information impacted on less of women participation to respond the problem, and also the absence of mitigation effort against this risk. And next slide, please. And these are a story from 2 women in the village who told us about the impact that they experience from this geothermal project, and that and this story capture and said that they were very panicked and afraid when they heard the loud explosion and from the drilling process. And the smoke was also a very pungent smell, and made it uncomfortable and difficult to breathe for them. Next slide, please. We also try to looking the document, and according to the environmental and social impact assessment, or ISIA, for the Blawan Ijen geothermal power plant project, the company claims to have obtained free, prior, and informed consent from affected household based on the census data and meeting record. However, our field findings reveal that there is of lack women's participation since planning to the decision making. This is also a gap between company that they produce the document with the realities experienced by the women on the ground. And as we know also, in many cases, gender aspect are either weakly implemented or entirely overlooked, and it will leading to the ongoing marginalization of women in the context of the energy development. And our second finding is the impact of infrastructure and environmental damage on women is not accommodated and minimally discussed. Next slide, please. So the conversation about energy transition project are often dominated by the topic related to technical matters, like and also like the recruitment for the workers and also the village development aid. While the topic on how it will impact on the women, such as the risk for the reproductive health, the risk from the water pollution, and also the risk for the plant, etc., are not discussed, and how it also very high risk for the pregnant women and also women who about to give birth also that really rarely discussed, as well as how it will risk to the person with disabilities. And this is a story from one of the health workers in the village that said like the severely damaged road pose a high risk to the pregnant women who are about to give birth. So they explain that they experience this during they provided the services to the pregnant women. And also due to the water pollution for the several months in three hamlets like the small unit in the village, there is the resident protested, and the company provided clean water every day by sending water tank trucks. But in some hamlets, water tank are provided like twice a day, like every morning and the evening. However, in some hamlet, only once, like arrive in the morning. And because the norm and the culture in the village community still place housework as the women's work, women are the one who will get the water. And we also found a story, you can also see from these stories, that women who could not, there is a women who could not get the clean water, so they had to spend more money to buy water. And this situation certainly not only adds to the double burden for women, but also add to the economic burden, to more economic burden for the families. Yeah, next slide, please. And we all also quote from a Celios research that published this year, as Mbak Imun mentioned earlier, that stated, according to the company document, that drilling and construction-based requirement approximately 1,200 gallons per minute for water. So this water is sourced from the surface river located in the village surrounding the project site, and is needed over the next 24 months or a years, 2 years contracted periods. And for this company also need huge amount of the electrical energy to live and transport the water. So local resident may not only be in the competition with the company for access to clean water, but also for the electricity. And as we know also that water plays a vital role to supply the daily needs, especially the needs related to the reproductive health. And during our field research in the village, we experienced by ourselves a fairly long power outage that lasting from 3 to nearly 48 hours. While water pumps required electricity, so it leads to difficult for residents to access to the water in the household. Next slide, please. I'll try to quick. And the third findings that we found is risk to the sustainability of socioeconomic livelihoods, and the impact on women are not taken into account. We also found that there are some residents, including women, that have been able to earn income, like by renting their homes or their house to the workers that works in the project site. But residents and also women were still unaware of the extent of land conversion that may take place once the geothermal plants become fully operational, that which is of for mid 20 for mid this year, yeah. And there are also growing concern about how this development might affect nearby agricultural land and housing areas. One of the anticipated impact is potential damage to crops, which could reduce their equality and in turn lower farmer income from harvesting, posing a significant threat to local livelihood. Women in the village will remain poor, and because their home and also their farming field including are included in the project development zone, and the potential loss of this vital source of livelihood poses a serious threat to household economic resilience, and it can also trigger multiple crises within family dynamic, including increased risk of the GBV, and also the displacement caused by land loss may lead to the rising unsafe migration. And our fourth finding is misunderstanding of protection that resulting in inaccurate implementation. Workers of geothermal power plant project come from the outside the village, and they rent the resident house, and also there are some dormitories, and the company also hired like the resident to be a workers for various technical works. And initially, female workers were also recruited. However, in the recent years, it stopped by the company following alleged cases like of affairs between local women and non-local workers, and this field study time limitation, we were unable to examine in depth whether any of these incidents may involve element of the sexual violence. In such cases often occur within unequal power dynamic and may involve manipulation. They have also been reports of hidden cases of unplanned pregnancies, which warrant further investigation, particularly regarding the extent to which this may be linked to incoming migrant workers. Yeah, there are also like some information, and the company respond. We think that halting the employment opportunities for women due these alleged incidents, effectively shift the perceived source of the problem onto to the women. So this form of the protection policy, while appearing to offer protection, in reality reinforce the discrimination practices by excluding women from economic participation rather than addressing the root cause of misconduct. And yeah, I think next slide, please. And we think that Just Energy Transition Partnership Framework required safeguarding as key standard in all project activity. But in practices, it raised a concern regarding the understanding and perspective of the protection that should be in line with the core safeguarding principles, as well as women's human rights, and do not reinforce discriminatory practices under this guise of the protection. And the fifth finding, there are also some complaint by the resident in which that the company responds, but we think that there are no currently like the safe and inclusive dialogue forums where the women can comfortably share their experience, express their needs and opinion, or raise complaint without fear or intimidation. And also there are currently there are still debate about who is responsible for certain impact, such as like the damage that face in the village and etc. I will proceed to the conclusion. So, marginalization mirror and reinforce broader pattern of the gender inequality in patriarchal communities embedded in the social system from the household level to the community structures, and is now being replicated in the context of the energy transition project. The second one, there is a noticeable absence of the gender-sensitive analysis regarding the specific risks and impact on women and other vulnerable groups, particularly in relation to change in the gender relation and power dynamic within the communities. The information of the benefit, including on access to clean energy product from JET project, as this case study area has not been clearly communicated to the villager, especially women and also other vulnerable group. In addition, discriminatory perspective remain embedded in the policies related to the employment access and worker protection. Environmental and also social impact have been inadequately analyzed through a gender and social inclusion lens, intersectional approach, which are necessary to understand the layer effect on women across different identities and social position are largely absent. And our recommendation based on our 5 findings are it should be integrated gender and social inclusion analysis. It is important for company to incorporate robust gender analysis and social inclusion framework, including intersectionality. The second one, critically assess green energy project that stakeholder must critically evaluate a project label as green or clean energy, integrating not only their environmental claim but also their social impact, especially on women and other vulnerable groups. And also, we think that strengthen the role of women organization is very important because women organizations should be meaningfully involved in articulating and advocating for the recognition of the women experience. This also include how to identify gender-specific impact and advancing women's rights to full, informed, and equal participation in energy transition process. I think that's all from our presentation. Thank you, and back to you, Miss Afida.
Thank you so much, Mbak Ika and Mbak Imun, for your presentation. It's such an insightful research study. Thank you for doing this. We know that from your findings, it's really an unfortunate thing to know that women have lack of participation in the project. For me personally, it feels like women voices being muted even before the project is going. And from your research findings, we also know that from the business side and also government don't really conduct the FPIC principle to the community. So many damage caused and risk without being addressed. So once again, thank you so much, Mbak Ika and Mbak Imun, for the insight. So we move to our next speaker. Our next speaker is from the Prakarsa. The Prakarsa is an institution for research and policy advocacy based in Jakarta, Indonesia. This institution focuses on social policy, fiscal policy, and sustainable development issue. Please join me in welcoming Ibu Dwi Rahayu. Mbak Dwi will dive into the research findings on renewable energy financing policies in Indonesia, including how the gender lens investment approach is being applied. Mbak Dwi, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Mbak Afida, for the time. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's session. My name is Dwi Rahayu Ningrum, and I'm working with the Prakarsa as Sustainable Development Policy Officer and focusing on sustainable finance issues for improving policies as well as the practice of financial sector in Indonesia. So I'm honored to be here in a special webinar on cross-country learning on women in JET and gathering with great researchers here, campaigners, advocates in women and GATSI. So in this special occasion, please allow me to share the presentation on how we can view Indonesia's energy transition financing through a gender justice lens. So this research is part of the research that developed by LBH Apik and Kalena Mitra. So this is section which focusing on the financing. But to begin, I would like to show this slide. This is the impact of the climate crisis requires rapid, deep, and immediate action. As we know that climate change is not a future threat; it's a present crisis. So according to IPCC's 2023 report, the sixth assessment report, we are already witnessing severe changes in ecosystems, water systems, and weather patterns, all of which affect livelihoods and well-being across the world. And this is just not about scientists gathering, producing report, but it also how climate change also affect the intergenerational justice. So the climate crisis affects multiple generations differently. Those born in 1950s, 1980s, 2000s, and even today in 2020 will all experience different climate realities throughout their lives. So in this right of the slide, we see from the climate action tracker data. I'm sorry about the current policies that presently in place globally around the world are projected to result in about 2.7 degrees Celsius warming above pre-industrial level. So, and also there is a significant gap from the target and implementation about made by the government. So, it will lead us 2.7 degrees Celsius of warming, and that is a dangerous trajectory. So we need a rapid, deep, and immediate action to tackle this climate crisis. Going to the next slide. This is why energy transition financing must integrate JETSI. So talking about the climate, the energy sector is the largest GHG greenhouse gas emission emitters. So the energy sectors in Indonesia, to be specific, is still dominated by fossil fuels. Data from ISR 2024 stated that 81% of Indonesia's power generation in 2023 is backed up by the fossil fuels, and it is resulting in emission of more than 200 metric ton of CO2 equivalent. So the energy sector become the priority in enhanced nationally determined contribution from the government that targeted to reduce amount more than 300 million tons of CO2 by 2030. So transitioning away from fossil fuel is essential to combat climate change. It meaning shifting the dirty energy, fossil fuel base to renewable energy is essential. Now the financing mechanism. So we need vast amounts of capitals to achieve the transition goals. We need both private and public financial sector to support this transition. And when we go to the gender equality, disability, and social inclusion, why it should be integrated in the energy transition? Because energy transition impacts people differently. Women, people with disabilities, and other marginalized groups often face higher energy poverty, limited access to decision making, and also fewer benefits from energy projects since energy sector is very masculine. So if we don't consider these disparities, we risk reinforcing inequality. So in the other hand, inclusive energy projects, those that are planned and financed with a gender lens, are more sustainable and deliver better social and economic outcomes. We're going to the next slide. This is the landscape of climate financing in Indonesia. This is data from CPI. So most of the financing going to the energy sector. So based on data from ISR, the estimates investment of for energy transition, we required for about 20 to 25 billion US dollars annually until 2030 to shift our energy system toward renewables. But then in the current situation, the annual investment of renewable energy sector in Indonesia still less than 2 billion US dollar. So it's a huge gap to fulfill on how the financial sector should support this energy transition and also renewable energy financing. Going to the next slide. That's part of the background. So this is the research objectives. We aim to the first to analyze the renewable energy transition financing policy schemes in Indonesia, particularly in the context of JETP and ETM, as this is the landmark projects in Indonesia for energy transition. The second is to identify whether renewable energy financing schemes include key consideration to ensure that policies and projects are not only focused on technical and financial aspects, but also on their impacts on social equity. And the last objective is to evaluate energy transition financing using justice framework and gender-lens investment to understand the extent to which financing scheme support the integration of gender perspective and ensure that women and vulnerable groups receive equitable benefits. Next slide, about the research method. So we use qualitative descriptive approach with data collection and document studies. So this is the some documents that we analyze in the study, including CITP Jati Indonesia, CISA Scoping Report, ADB Gender Framework, UNDP Gender and Climate Finance, Ministry of Finance Regulation, as well as the banking regulatory policies, the financing and investment policies through sustainability report of the biggest bank in Indonesia, BNI, BRI, and BCA. We also use framework analysis, the gender lens investment, and we are trying to create a criteria for each indicator. For example, on the entrepreneurship and ownership, we also align this with the justice framework, the recognition justice. The indicator is the percentage of female ownership in renewable energy transition project initiatives. And then for the leadership aspect, this is aligned with the procedural justice. The percentage of women in senior management in companies where project implementation is financed. The third is the employment, the percentage of women as workers. The fourth is supply chain, the commitment to women in the supply chain, products and services, renewable energy that enhance the well-being of women and other vulnerable groups and promotes gender equality. And the last is the portfolio aligned with procedural justice, financing through financial institutions that have policies to promote gender equality. Now we are going to the findings and analysis. Next slide, please. Yeah. First, we analyzed the energy transition financing in Indonesia under the JETP Indonesia. So the JETP is the, as we know, and Mbak Imun and also Mbak Ika also explained before that this is a landmark agreement between Indonesia and a group of international partners, international partnership group countries, including UK, Japan, Germany, and other countries, and also private financiers under the GFANZ, Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, to support Indonesia transition to clean energy. So as we know on paper in CIPP document, it sounds promising, but in practice, the structure is that heavy. From the pledge 20 billion US dollars, less than 300 million is in grants. So most of money is in loans, even it is concessional with the lower rates, but it can be an additional for Indonesia's fiscal burden. So what's more troubling is that community support is very limited. So most of the finding goes to, for the grant, most of the finding goes to technical studies and capacity building, not directly to affected communities like coal workers or women in surrounding villages. And although JETP is supposed to reduce emission, it still allows coal-based captive power plants, privately owned facilities that serve industries that consider to support the green energy to continue operating. So this is contradicts to the goal of just and sustainable energy transition, since it will create more greenhouse gas emission, and it will exacerbate the climate crisis. The next slide. And this is the energy transition financing in Indonesia in the form of ETM, Energy Transition Mechanism by ADB. So the ADB ETM is also draw a concern in the practice right now, since the pilot project, the Cirebon one, that would be early retired, also drawn concern related to the meaningful participation from the community, and also the transparency of the ADB ETM in disclosing information related to this project. So basically, ETM ADB provide the financial facilities under the ETM schemes. The first is carbon reduction facilities. This is to take over ownership of the coal-fired power plants and manage them until they reach their predetermined retirement date. And the second is clean energy facility, on focusing on channeling investment into renewable energy projects. So ETM is not merely about the early retirement, but they also aim um, uh, to um, to more channeling investment into renewable energy projects. So under the ETM structure also favors the asset owners, those who profit from the plans, not the communities impacted by its closure. And again, it is ETM is alone heavy, which shifts the financial risk to the country instead of creating inclusive solutions. Next slide. This is the other energy transition financing instruments that we also identified. So if we talk about energy transition financing, probably we we would we would say it is ETM and it is JETP, but there are so many energy transition financing instruments as well from the private financial sector. For example, the conventional financing, including the equity, non-concessional loans, grants, and also funding from the state budget through the climate budget again, and also the innovative financing coming from private financial sector, including microfinance and P2P, peer-to-peer lending, and also green bonds, green sukuk, carbon finance, sustainability-linked bonds, and sustainability loans, and all of these financing instruments that usually forcing finance companies on the ground to shift their practice to be more responsible and sustainable and accounted for environmental and also social impacts of their operation from the company. Next slide. So this slide is about does the current financing mechanism account for social justice and gender equality? So from the CIPP JETP and also the ADB, since ADB already have the gender framework for their projects. So while there are verbal commitments to inclusion, but these aren't backed by measurables indicators. So there's no data on women's ownership or leadership in renewable projects if we use the gender lines investment framework to analyze this document. So there's no metrics for how many women are employed across the energy supply chain, and about JETP itself, as one of the project under JETP is the financing of PLTP IJEN, which previously explained by Mbak Imun and Mbak Ika. So this project is financed by the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation with the amount more than 100 billion US dollars. And yes, by this project, we have heard about the impacts to women, especially on how they are not being involved in the decision making, as well as the not addressing the impacts that women encountered because of this project. The next slide. Okay, I only have 5 minutes left. So this analysis in the bank's policy, the financing policy of the banks. So BCA support women-owned MSMEs, but these are not targeted at renewable energy. The gender strategy focus internally and the empowerment and the manpower. so not externally on the impacts of their investment. Meanwhile, BNI has a stronger commitment to women's economic empowerment and offers green bonds, but again, not specific focus on women in energy. And lastly, BRI does finance green project and women-led business, but does not link the two. So across the board, there is a little effort to integrate GATSI into actual financing strategies or supply chain consideration. Next slide. So we also analyze we also identify the structure and equality in energy transition financing schemes by using the justice framework. So procedurally, women and marginalized communities are excluded from the decision making, and distributionally, most of the funds go to big players, state enterprises, and corporations. So while local communities, particularly women, see little benefit. And there is no mandatory involvement of women in project plannings or benefit sharing. In the remedial justice, there are no robust grievance mechanism or livelihood recovery programs for those negatively impacted. So if we use this for justice framework, it is we can say that the all of the documents, JETI, ADB, and also the private financial sector policy is not addressing the women or gender justice. And the next slide. So yes, this is opportunities to promote women's participation in the energy transition. Despite this challenge, there are clear opportunities. We are at the moment of policy updates. Yeah, there is ongoing CIPP JETI update, and also further national energy planning. And also, this is the time to embed gender responsive project design, develop accountability tools, and also strengthen the role of civil society. We can promote women's leadership in clean energy business, support local economic transformation, and upskill women to thrive in the green economy. Now we are going to the conclusion. Yeah, to conclude this presentation, I would say the Indonesia's energy transition financing is currently focused more on technical decarbonization and macroeconomic stability than on justice or inclusion. The gender lens investing framework has not been integrated in all of the document. Financial institutions lack due diligence for gender equity, and the few grants available are too small to create transformative social outcomes. Without addressing these blind spots, the transition risks failing the very communities it should empower. We are going to the recommendations. The next slide. So to move forward, we recommend integrating clearer gender indicators into energy and financing policies. This means measurable targets for women's leadership, workforce participation, and ownership in energy. We also need financing schemes tailored for women in remote areas like microfinance and simplified application processes. Most importantly, we must shift from loans to grants so the energy transition doesn't become a debt trap. Only with GETSI at the core can we ensure that this transition is not only green, but fair, inclusive, and empowering for all. So that's all from my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mbak Dewi, for those great points on financing challenges and opportunities in just energy transition issue. Your presentation really answered why energy transition financing must integrate GATSI principles because it will be more sustainable and beneficial for the community and the project itself. Thank you, Mbak Dewi. Now, we shift our focus to Malaysia. We are honored to have a representative from Klima Action Malaysia or KAMI. KAMI is a climate justice and feminist organization that advocates for the declaration of a climate emergency in Malaysia. They use human rights-based framework through their projects and has focused on the empowerment of vulnerable communities of climate governance. Please welcome Ili Nadia as a Program Director of Climate Action Malaysia. Nadia will present key findings from the study GETBHR in Peninsular Malaysia. Her insight will help us to understand how human rights and gender perspective are being integrated or sometimes overlooked in Malaysia's energy transitions. Nadia, please, the screen is yours.
Hello, hi. Hi everyone, my name is Nadia. I'm not seeing my screen change to the slides. Oh yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much, Fevda, or the technical team behind this amazing session. I'm really thankful to be here. And I think this is one of the very few sessions that I've been that really tries to center voices from Southeast Asia, specific on the two countries, on Indonesia and Malaysia. So, next slide, please. So, just a bit of introduction on who we are. Climate Action Malaysia, we are a climate justice and feminist organization based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. So we work on building capacity of civil society and, of course, doing policy advocacy on climate governance that is based on using rights-based lens and trying to improve the way how climate governance is being monitored, is being designed, and how it's being used and utilized by not only the government but also people. When I say people, that could be affected people, it could be NGOs, think tanks, etc. And I think what's really interesting about the work that we've been doing over the last 5 years since we were established was it started really from the grassroots. We started by doing our work by doing climate protest on the ground in Kuala Lumpur back then in 2019. So since then, we've been slowly building our capacity in doing more policy research, more advocacy, diplomacy, and at the same time trying to engage with communities who are most affected and trying to build that circle of trust when it comes to discussing issues on climate and energy transition in Malaysia. And gender responsive or gender transformative initiatives is something that we look for in the most long-term in our long-term targets, partly because Malaysia's energy and climate initiatives and climate governance in Malaysia does not really does not really have anything on gender. It's basically right now a gender blind. And I think what the inputs that I'm getting from Kotimun before this and then the previous speakers as well is that the landscape in Indonesia is far more advanced at the moment. And of course, the presentation by Prakasa just now have just showed how complex is the challenges on energy transition finance, and that would mean that civil society or think tanks have already been working on these kind of issues at that kind of level, but the same can't be said in Malaysia. So in Malaysia, kami is still the only group in our country that worked on this specific on gender building a gender responsive just energy transition and also climate governance in Malaysia. So whatever it is I learned today is absolutely amazing, and this is something that we hope to collaborate with the rest in the future. And I'm really happy to hear that there's a coalition of women in Indonesia that is working on this, and I hope that best practices and even challenges can be shared in other platforms in the future. So thank you. So That's a long introduction. Can we also this particular slide? So we published a report sometime earlier this year on just energy transition, looking from the business and human rights angle, and very specific on the UNGP guiding UNGP BHR, the United Nations Guiding Principles. And we are looking into how just energy transition using these principles can be used in Malaysia to really center justice in what we currently have in Malaysia, which is just an energy transition. So for everyone here, a bit of understanding is that Malaysia has an energy transition plan. It's called the National Energy Transition Roadmap, but it does not really center or even have any principles or elements of social justice that uses these international human rights normatives as based on the way how this national action plan is being rolled out in Malaysia. So we hope by using this particular lens, it will bring a better understanding on how it can be implemented by different stakeholders from the government and cross-sectoral as well, and also businesses. And when I say businesses, it means businesses. These are private sectors. They can also be MNCs, but we also mean businesses that is owned by the government. So government also do services, do provide those kind of services, and these are I think the slope. I think uh, the the barriers and also the limitations on this are still not quite known on how businesses that is being conducted by the Malaysian government has a role play in the just energy transition. We know there's a lot, but we just don't have enough data to substantiate some of the claims or some of the issues that challenges we already seen on the ground in Malaysia. So can we move to the next slide, please? Right. So I already mentioned that what the report is all about, and it is to provide just energy transition recommendations using the BHR lens and create a platform for civil society to discuss for a more robust and effective national action plan on business and human rights and other related energy transition policies, such as the National Energy Transition Roadmap. So we also believe that by doing this report, we can understand better on how Malaysia energy transition pathway could include marginalized and vulnerable voices, and also very important affected communities such as workers that are not really visible in this energy transition, and whether these kind of recommendations could provide an equitable outcomes for them. And when we say for them, it's also for us. From my understanding in the work that I've been doing over the past few years, that using feminist and gender analysis in the way how we do things by working with the most vulnerable and most affected is really what policymaking is all about. And that would mean when you cater for these groups, that means the rest of the community, the impact is positive to the rest of the community. It means that everyone is being taken care of, right? And their needs are being listened to. And we also know Malaysia is also chairing the ASEAN this year, and there's a lot of renewals of policies and declarations, and even the issues around business and human rights, how to link it to just energy transition is also being discussed. And I felt that the objectives of the report, the recommendations from the report can really bring to some of these ideas of how Malaysia's voices and also improving the way how Malaysia do business and policy making at the ASEAN level. So next slide, please. So this report framework, I'm not going to go deep into this. I think I've already mentioned we are using several frameworks. One is the UNGP, the other one is our own National Energy Transition Roadmap. And also we heavily use the framework from the ILO, which is the International Labour Organization's Just Transition Guidelines. And that is really a centerpiece of this particular report. And alongside, there's a number of other UN mechanisms and frameworks. And we also look into the National Baseline Assessment on Business and Human Rights in Malaysia, which also has a strong call on gender and also labor's rights. And on top of that, we also include the work that we have done over the past few years, specific on working on climate governance, women's empowerment, energy transition, indigenous community, in the form of the research, the case studies that we've been documenting over the last since 2019. So next slide, please. So I'm sure that everyone here are well aware of what is the Just Transition Guidelines. It is a just transition for all towards an environmentally sustainable economy, needs to be well managed and contribute to the goals of decent work for all, social inclusion, and the eradication of poverty. So this particular statement is really critical when we form the recommendations or even the framework within this particular report. And we believe that this could also provide the kind of guideline principles for the Malaysian government in how they do their advocacy at national level, obviously, and of course in the ASEAN. So next slide, please. And of course, UNGP is based on three specific pillars, which is to protect, respect, and remedy. So I think Kotimun has also mentioned a lot about remedial justice, grievance mechanisms. That is a really centerpiece of this UNGP. And protect pillar, it means that governments must protect against human rights abuse by third parties, including business enterprise. And the second pillar is respect. So the role of business is to respect human rights by complying with all applicable laws. And this must also mean that businesses that is owned by governments must also respect human rights. So that is lines a bit blurry at the moment, but we do hope in the next few cycles of the UNGP implementation in Malaysia, we can see that in more clarity. Next slide. And these are just some of scope methodology. I'm not going to go deep into this, but maybe just a little bit on um, uh, who are the people that we've interviewed, very specific on this, and of course, whose voices that we are centering here. We did a number of focus group discussion and informal interviews with businesses, and that would mean the private sector, academia, business coalitions, government bodies and agencies, ministries, civil society organizations, and international organizations. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to skip. I know we are very tight on time. And the thematic areas that is covered in this report is on social protection, skills development, occupational safety and health, climate justice, rights of vulnerable groups and affected communities, enterprise policies, economic and growth policies, and industrial and sectoral policies. Next slide, please. And this is just a little bit of understanding of how we sector the report. Basically, the findings are based on some of our national statistics. As we know, our energy sector is 78% of our own GHG emission in 2019. This is Malaysia. And electricity consumption, more than 70% is by industrial and commercial sectors. And energy transition is part of the climate change mitigation, but we don't really talk about on how this will impact other sectors within, for example, agriculture or even adaptation and resilience. We're just looking at climate change mitigation. So these are some of the baseline. There's a bunch of data in the report. So if you are interested, you can go and have a look at it. And the way how we section the report is on we put economy, labor rights, climate justice, environmental rights, and of course the rights of vulnerable communities and affected people within the key issues. So these are the key issues that's being highlighted, and the consequences if these issues are not being taken care of, or there are any remedial or to be addressed in a more not only substantive, but in a more structural way, that will create more uneven and unstable energy supply, rise in unemployment, reduced income and social well-being, reduced profit and stranded assets, deepening of systemic inequalities, environmental degradation, biodiversity loss, weak climate resilience, and our failure to meet our national climate targets, and of course, the global climate target. So if you're interested, I can't go one by one over here, but in the purpose of today's discussion, I would like to cover on the gender inequality portion of this particular report. Yeah, next slide, please. And I think next two slides, I think I will share, the slides will be shared. So I'm not going to go deep into this. These are just recommendations. Next slide. Another one. Another one. I think this is 12. Right, correct. So, correct, thank you. So the gender equality in Malaysia's energy transition is very much structural. I think the same issue is quite similar to what Indonesia is also facing. For example, the women's labor force is just 56%. As compared to men, which is 83%. And the leadership gap of women is just on 17.7% on top of company boards. And these are just public listed companies. And there is no legal gender mainstreaming in any energy policies. And 56% of women face workplace discrimination. These are just some of the statistics of a baseline on how we look on gender inequality and how it might exacerbate during Malaysia's energy transition. Next slide, please. So, how do energy transition deepens energy inequality? So, first, renewable energy jobs mostly go to men. And we know this because even as the world moves towards renewable energy, solar, wind, hydro, microhydro, gender gap in employment still persists. So we know that skill and technical jobs in renewable, like engineers, technicians, project managers, are all male dominated because these are STEM fields. These are science, technology, engineering, maths. They are traditionally being dominated by men, and hiring practices are often not gender inclusive. So no specific targets or incentives to recruit women, and there's not also a career trajectory for women within these fields. So that is something that we've seen not only in Malaysia but many countries around the world. And social norms discourage women from joining technical fields. So in Malaysia, although women graduate in STEM at high rates, a few enter or stay in the energy transition energy workforce because there's lack of flexible working conditions. For example, no childcare support, rigid hours, and some of them have to work in a very precarious environment. And discrimination and workplace harassment, race are still also happening. And this brings back to an impact that renewable energy sectors could replicate all fossil fuel gender inequalities unless intervention happens. And number two, energy projects displace women from land and jobs. So we know that large-scale energy projects like mega dams or biofuel plantations, solar farms, often require land from communities, and women are particularly impacted because they often do not hold formal land titles, even if they are the primary users for farming, water collection, subsistence livelihood. And displacement means loss of access to food income, water, and fuel sources. And these resettlement schemes of compensation often fail to consult women and reinforcing economic insecurity. And this comes back again to what the previous speakers have been talking about about FPIC, right? And within FPIC, if there's no really a meaningful FPIC, then all these resettlement schemes and compensation cannot be mobilized and cannot be institutionalized, partly because you don't have an effective FPIC, and sometimes there was just gaps within that processes. And of course, it results in energy development that increases the economic vulnerability of women unless gender responsive safeguards are applied. And we also look into rural and poor urban women that bear heavier unpaid care burdens. And as we know, as previously, just what the other speakers have spoken about, that climate change, energy transition alter local economies and resources, and women's unpaid care increases by there's so many different ways, and some of the commonalities that we cover through our case studies is for example, rural women having to work farther from water, even firewood, and also some of them still have energy poverty because they still could not access the electricity from the nearby, even though there are nearby facility on energy, new forms of energy to produce electricity, but does not necessarily mean that the local community will get a fair share of that electricity. And sometimes it's actually more expensive because they need to build mini grids and also expand those particular lines because some of these communities don't have even infrastructure like roads, even electricity grids coming to their villages. And for poor urban women, they face rising costs of living and fewer support systems like subsidized childcare. And of course, a lot of women in urban areas in Malaysia, they use the public transportation system. I think there's a percentage that women are the dominant users of public transportation in Malaysia, and these are not really. We still don't have much data on how the change in energy transition impacts public transportation in Malaysia, and how that will impact women in the long run. And of course, if in the next slide, if you, I think we are already on the next slide. I'm sorry. If for number 4, to be excluded from decision making and project benefits, I think this is the same across Malaysia and Indonesia. In all the analysis that's been done by previous speakers and researchers, that women are rarely involved in consultation and decision making processes about almost everything. And of course, energy projects is just one of them, right? And community meetings, for example, on compensation, relocation, and new project planning are mostly male dominated. There's no specific structure, of course, to cater to women's specific needs and perspectives of needing clean water access, sustainable livelihoods, and because not having that particular lens, therefore these issues are mostly overlooked. And very, very critical is on the financial benefits like resettlement funds, job offers, community development programs largely go towards men So there's no really also much data on this. These are just some of the data that we got from the very scattered case studies. So not having a baseline of data on this really impacts us of understanding of what's happening truly, and how women are really sidelined from shaping or benefiting from energy projects that was meant to develop their communities. So we also find, next slide, please. So all right, I just I just was told I have 2 minutes left. Okay, really quickly here. So on this particular slide, I'm sorry, I can't really see. So we also find that the institutional and policy gaps within the research that we've done. So Malaysia currently does not have a formal institutional mechanism or focal point dedicated to integrating gender to climate and energy policies. So without this focal point, gender concerns are sidelined in national and climate energy planning. So there's not a single authority responsible to ensuring that policies, funding, implementation, monitoring that reflect women's rights, needs, and leadership. And of course, this absence, what I mentioned, it leads to its gender blind energy transition and climate governance. And of course, it made gender commitments across ministries inconsistent. And of course, the second one is lack of gender mainstreaming in ministries and energy agencies. So we know that these ministries do not apply a gender perspective to their policies, projects, and budgets. We don't have a climate budget tagging in Malaysia, and we also do not have a gender responsive climate budget tagging in Malaysia, as we have seen in Indonesia. And gender is often treated as a secondary concern and not a core requirement. It's been often seen as a afterthought, and therefore project planning and impact assessment and budgeting don't actually ask how will this affect women differently, how will this reinforce existing inequalities. And of course, very critical towards all this is gender disaggregated data. These are massively missing. We don't have a focal point. We also don't have any baseline, and we don't have that at the national level gender disaggregated data related to all the issues that I've talked about. And therefore, not having data, we don't have evidence. Policymakers can't make decisions, and of course, civil society and people who are affected will be more affected, definitely. And of course, we have fragmented governance and poor accountability, and this is very clear. We have inconsistent priorities. There's no clear monitoring and accountability mechanism. So even when gender is being mentioned in policy, it often fails at implementation stage because you have weak governance and accountability and transparency. So that is one of the next slide, please. I'll go very quickly in the next few slides. And these are some of the recommendations on governance that we come up with a number of recommendations. One of it is on governance and institution. I mentioned a lot about gender focal point and how now what are the better options to mainstream gender in ministries and NGO agencies, how they can build and maintain gender disaggregated database and strengthen their coordination and accountability mechanisms. Next slide, please. So there are also we also speak about economy empowerment, where we sector it by what the government should do and what businesses should do. I think it's very clear across Indonesia and Malaysia. There needs to be that incentivizing to recruit women into renewable energy roles, and how do we do that? And that is something that is yet to be seen, right? It's just on policy paper. And of course, to implement gender inclusive procurement and supply chain practices. Next slide, please. We also listed policy recommendations on education and workforce, on how to increase more women and girls in STEM and renewable energy. There are several training programs currently in Malaysia, and we believe that by having a gender lens and also an energy transition element, and of course governance within these programs will increase women participation in the workforce specific on energy transition and renewable energy. energy. And next slide, please. And the other one is, of course, workplace rights and protection. In terms of enforcing anti-sexual harassment laws in workplace, Malaysia do not have a law on that. And making gender-responsive grievance mechanism mandatory for all energy projects. And businesses should also set up their own internal grievance mechanism and commit to equal pay for equal work across their operations. Next slide, please. And I think this is the last recommendation, that government should run public campaigns in highlighting women's role in energy and climate transition, and integrate gender equality messaging into national climate narratives. And I think what this report is also important, next slide please, is also for civil society, right, to be a launching point for capacity building on just energy transition among civil society across all the diversity that we are, to enhance our foundation understanding of JET-BHR, and for that to find better ways to collaborate with partners either in Malaysia, or what Malaysia also needs right now is to collaborate with partners like Indonesia that has already been quite advanced in understanding this issue and having better data and analysis to build a sustainable platform for just energy transition that is gender transformative. I think I'll end it here. I'm sorry if I took a little bit more than I expected. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Nadia, for those detailed insights. The report is very comprehensive, very insightful, and has really good point on recommendation for the government, business, and even CEO sides. From your presentations, we also find there are similarities between Indonesia and Malaysia, which women not really involved in the GET project. The policy tends to be gender blind, and how the government and business don't really conduct FPIC principle. If you guys interested to deep dive more about Kami's research, you can go to Kami website and you can download the report with free. Okay, before we move to other speaker, if you guys have any question, you can type it in Q&A box. You can ask it in either English or Bahasa Indonesia, or later in Q&A session, if you want to open your microphone to speak directly to the speaker, we will allow you to do that as well. So, here is a speaker that come from Asia Feminist Coalition. Asia Feminist Coalition is a network that dedicated to promoting gender equality and empowering women across Asia. They collaborate together to advocate for women's rights and gender-based challenge, as well as provide resources and support for women, girls, and any feminist organization in Asia. Please welcome Mira Nerin from Asia Feminist Coalition. Mira, the screen is yours.
Thank you so much. I'll just wait for my presentation to start. And okay, so thank you so much to all the other speakers. I've learned so much today, especially around specific kind of energy projects and how the voices need to be continually centered. And I hope this kind of work can continue in a more powerful way going forward. My name is Myra Butt. I am the Gender Justice Policy Advocacy Manager at Oxfam in Asia. But today I'm representing the Asia Feminist Coalition, and I'll be talking about a piece that we worked on, which was published in December 2023, which is on towards a feminist just energy transition in Asia. And I'll share the link in the chat as well for anyone who might want to refer to this later. The next slide, please. So I feel like this slide is coming in too late, but maybe I'll just go through it very briefly. So there's a bit of a confusion sometimes around when we say what do we mean by feminist jet. There's a lot of confusion, and we typically try to I feel like a lot of stakeholders also try to limit it to just kind of only women's rights, or just kind of making it like a women economic empowerment issue, or just kind of limiting it. But it's two things. It's moving away from fossil fuels, which includes polluting industries and unhealthy work environments, and at the same time also tackling economic insecurity, equality, systems of oppression that underpin fossil fuel capitalism. So the idea is that we not only transition, we transition fairly, and we try to undo the ills that we've done and make sure that not a lot more damage is done. We've talked a lot about intersectionality, so I won't go into it too much. But again, gender, class, caste, race, location, nationality, how these different kind of identities intersect with our relationship to energy. And it's a question that we need to continually ask. And again, it's really heartening to see a lot of these FGDs and KIIs. And again, bringing voices of people to the center is something that we need to continually work on. The evolution of both household power dynamics and the division of labor during energy transitions can generate opportunities for women, and that can promote human well-being and gender justice and give women greater access to decision-making spaces. So it's about economics, it's about decision-making, it's about rights, it's like a range of things. I won't be going into the four kinds of justice, because I think the two presentations before that was covered beautifully, and it helped me understand a lot of like what do we mean by different forms of justice. So I won't be going into that. But as a coalition, we assert that we must absolutely work towards a feminist jet that recognizes the existing structural disparities within our patriarchal extractivist system. So it's not just about individual projects, it is, but then it's also about the system overall. Where does the money come from? Where does the money go back to? Who benefits from it? And we actively work towards redressing them, ensuring that women and other marginalized groups are central to the development and implementation of energy policies. Next slide, please. So this is a regional issue. Asia at large houses half of the world's population. Again, we house a lot of the world's poorest. And we are much more vulnerable to climate shocks and less prepared to adapt to transitions, thanks to, again, colonial legacies and weak governance systems as well. The ASEAN region collectively is the fourth largest energy consumer in the world. And I would just like to also flag here that the conversation that is happening is around growth, and how our growth needs to also consider at the cost of what? At the cost of people and the planet. So again, we are growing, but we are growing a lot on the basis of fossil fuels right now. And again, they're really entrenched in ASEAN. Progress has been slow, and prospects for future decarbonization remain dim, even as ASEAN's importance to the global economy continues to grow. So there's a lot of conversation on transition, and again, efforts are happening. But structurally, are we transitioning away from fossil fuels at like a national and regional level? That is a question that we continually need to ask as well. So again, like I mentioned, we are at the forefront of climate risk. ASEAN is home to three of the world's most at-risk countries: Myanmar, Philippines, and Thailand. And ASEAN as a region could lose 37.4% of its GDP by 2048 if climate change mitigation is not undertaken. And the reason why I've kept it in is because sometimes when we go to government stakeholders who are not convinced on climate, this stat can sometimes be very, very useful. And most ASEAN members, it's heartening to see they have committed to some form of net zero emissions within the next 30 to 40 years. But what's in policy and what's translated into actual actionable plans is a question that remains. And from 2010 to 2019, a total of USD 707.1 million in development finance was spent for various energy and gender programs in the ASEAN region. And I was just looking at the opening keynote speech around how the needs are around 180 billion. So obviously this is well short of what we need. But again, the point of sharing the stat is that huge money is flowing in, and it is again our role to hold it accountable, that it serves the needs and interests of people. Next slide, please. So this is a feminist issues, and I'll just be very briefly talking about it because again, this has been talked about quite a bit, but some of the things that our study kind of highlighted was that firstly, energy transitions are not gender neutral. Women bear a significant burden of energy poverty. They already have limited access to assets like land and capital, and it curbs their ability to transition effectively as other populations. The other bit, again, this has been talked about a bit as well, around that women do 4 times more unpaid care work than men in Asia. And relative to men, women take on a greater burden of care work. And this limits their access to paid work, educational and training opportunities, making it difficult for them to cope with structural transitions. So again, as transition happens, there are gaps that are creating, and women are left behind a lot more than men when they're unable to cope up with the transition. There's three interesting examples that I would like to share. One is that women's responsibility for cooking. A lot of times, and I've heard this in so many spaces, that energy transition is not a gender issue, and it's because what are you looking at energy, like how are you framing the conversation on energy? That's very important. So firstly, women's responsibility for cooking puts them at a risk of deadly health complications. This is when they have dirty cook stoves, and there's air pollution, and there's like trapped there's also like less ventilation in the residences. Fuel wood collection, secondly, puts their health and safety at risk. It takes really long for them to go and collect fuel wood, which again puts them at the risk of heat, risk of injuries, animal attacks, as well as physical and sexual violence. And adolescent girls are especially vulnerable within this. At the same time, if they come back, if they're unable to collect fuel wood, let's say, this puts the whole household under stress and exposes women and girls to gender-based violence at home. And thirdly, when women engage in income-generating activities, the lack of access to clean, affordable, and safe energy restricts the number of hours or the kind of activities that they can do to keep their businesses open. So they can only do certain kind of things that are, let's say, not dependent on energy and may, let's say, generate less profit or kind of or less revenue for the household overall. Yeah, next slide, please. So there's three principles that we came up with, and they're very useful for kind of steering the conversation forward. If we kind of remove ourselves from the current context and say, what should it look like? What should it ideally look like? So three kind of interesting things that we really kind of push for. One is strengthening energy democracy through small scale, locally owned, locally appropriate, and gender representative energy systems. If you're all aware, a lot of the energy conversation is really big projects, big solar farms, big wind farms, big projects. But what we don't always need scale. And like it was already shared that, sometimes right next to a plant, the local community is unable to access energy, or it's more expensive for them to be doing that. So we need smaller than bigger. So our obsession with scale needs to be scaled back. So energy democracy is energy production and use being owned and controlled by and for the community, including by uplifting women and other marginalized communities in the decision-making of energy system. If there is a plant that is next to my village, I should have a say in the decision-making around it. It's simply that. And it is critical to center the energy transition around environmentally and socially sound energy technologies, small scale and decentralized as much as possible. This makes it easier to increase the pace of energy transition and ensure that communities are equipped with the knowledge and skills to manage energy systems democratically and achieve energy sovereignty. Again, a lot of the conversations that, again, ADB is leading, World Bank is leading, governments are leading, is again on big plants that would serve, let's say, urban areas, or would serve growth, or would increase the profit of, let's say, private sector individuals without actually centering the needs of the community. So this is the first kind of principle. The second one is around addressing individual and systemic barriers to female labor force participation. And Nadia has talked a lot about underrepresentation of women in STEM in quite a bit of detail. So just building on that, again, when there are no women in STEM, there's no women in decision-making bodies, you are more likely to see gender-blind decision-making in energy sector. Also, women currently employed in the dirty energy sector and other carbon-intensive industries should be upskilled or reskilled. So this is something that we're asking, as they otherwise face decreased job flexibility or shift into lower-paying jobs and often precarious jobs or job losses. So it's very important to see where in energy women are employed and will they be losing out on jobs, and if yes, how can we upskill or reskill them? A concentrated focus on training, retaining, and incentivizing women to actively participate in the low carbon transition rather than merely offering skill programs or micro entrepreneurship opportunities which push women to empower themselves. So it shouldn't be a one-off training, a small scale training that we've done and we've left women to kind of fend for themselves. Is to think about it stepwise and see how they will fit in the, let's say, the chain overall. And then the third principle is emphasizing a rights-based approach and the gender-based need for ecosystem resilience. Again, this has been covered quite a bit in the previous presentations, but again, the rights that are very important to be continually keep on discussing are right to access information, right to justice and redress, and the right to free, prior and informed consent. Again, not going into too much detail because we've discussed it quite a bit. Renewable energy development should not absolutely come at the cost of community rights. Typically, renewable energy projects require significant areas of land, and we are very likely to see land grabbing practices that displace local people and negatively impact the most marginalized communities who often lose out. So it's continually keeping a lens of that and tracking where things are being set up and who is being affected and how. Next slide, please. So just a couple of barriers for feminist JET overall. Firstly, there are regulatory barriers, and I'm talking more about regional because unfortunately I don't have information on country kind of policy frameworks. But basically, ASEAN has a huge range of regional policy frameworks that affirmed its member states' commitment to gender equality, which we can use to kind of hold governments accountable. However, yet ASEAN is to formulate a collective gender responsive energy policy. So there's bits and pieces that we can build on, but there's no collective looking at gender and energy. And the ASEAN Center for Energy recently developed a roadmap to provide guidance for member states to formulate a gender responsive policy and accelerate renewable energy deployment in the region. So it's doing that, but it's at a different pace, and we need to constantly keep on track and seeing, what can we take and what can we take to our governments to kind of hold them accountable. There are financial barriers, particularly for small scale projects. They are not prioritized. These are considered less profitable compared to larger scale projects. So this is kind of like the ethos with loans and kind of other financial, and I'll talk about that in the next slides as well, is that they have to be profitable. You need to be able to pay back that amount, and which is why the community-centered energy projects are not prioritized. Development finance currently being mobilized is only in the form of ODA grants, which are 88.4%, and loans 11.16%. So other finance schemes like loans, loan guarantees, equity investments, and other forms of financial assistance exist, but are not fully utilized, which I think is fine overall. But it's just that I wanted to share that 88.4 and 11.16 and our need to continually ask for grants over loans. I think that's very important, and we'll go into that in the recommendations as well. Their knowledge and awareness barriers, women have less access to STEM fields and technical roles unlike men, even when they're qualified. I would also like to add, even when we do have women who are qualified, they're less likely to get decision-making roles. Further, cultural belief, traditions, and social values affect women's decision to enter STEM fields. So there's also like an issue of when women are going into university. And Nadia, thank you for sharing that again, that there are women, but sometimes they just don't get the roles. And the lack of role models and promotion mechanisms perpetuate misconceptions that engineering is dangerous and unsuitable for women who are assigned to traditional caregiving roles. So we need to work on this bit as kind of like gender professionals as well. And lastly, there are technical barriers, and I thought this was very interesting. Numerous research reports published by ASEAN Center for Energy cite the lack of data on gender and energy as a core obstacle in advancing gender jet in ASEAN. So there's little data and it needs to be collected. But the more interesting part is that, when we see energy reports or we see kind of like energy transition kind of plans, the indicators used are very interesting. So they're kilowatt hours, megawatts, GHG emissions, infrastructure metrics. It's about what we are measuring and what we are valuing, right? There's no comprehensive understanding of women's contributions and needs in the energy sector. We're not looking at that data in energy reports. And it is again our job collectively to push that, while we are looking at kilowatt, megawatt, GHG emissions, we also look at the impact on gender. So like, for example, how many women or how many community members will be dislocated? That should be part of the same report. We should be reading it in the same kind of breadth in that way. Next slide, please. So these are just a bunch of demands that I put together. Most of these are from the feminist jet piece that I've shared in the chat, but then a few of them are also from our internal lobbying that we're doing with ASEAN. So we need to accelerate decarbonization in practice by 2030 and really putting in the pressure for 2030 quite strongly. Because I mean, the more time bound we make it, the more it can hold government accountable in a very different way. We need gender responsive and care sensitive policy frameworks. And again, this is very broad, but based on whatever policy is coming out, we are able to track it effectively. We need not just policies, it needs to be backed by money. We need gender responsive budgeting for energy, and we need public infrastructure investments, particularly around investments that can address women's mobility, women's care responsibility. So we need those large scale investments that work for women and, in fact, people in community in large. We need women's leadership in energy-related decision-making, policy development, and implementation. And I think that the key to this is kind of looking for people and kind of championing them and seeing how we can also provide them a platform for discussions with the government. We need to mainstream a gender-inclusive approach in the governance. So from policy to money to governance and accountability frameworks of renewable energy projects and transition policies and investments. So there's the policy, there's money allocated to it, but once it's being kind of built or being run, it also needs to be kind of gender sensitive. There needs to be clear gender equality, disability, and social inclusion components in just transition frameworks and renewable energy policy documents and plans. So this falls under the policy framework, but using the JETC lens is also kind of useful. Now, coming to the blue kind of three points there, this is larger than our countries, really. So we need to scale up international climate finance for climate vulnerable regions in Asia, prioritizing gender equality. And this is why the Indonesia and Malaysia conversation is so important. Like, what can we work on together? What can we ask for together? We need to advocate for small grant funds that are particularly accessible for women, with these funds working towards local women-led ownership of energy projects and the upscaling of local initiatives, including cooperatives. So like community-run energy projects is something that we need to be advocating for. We need grants-based public climate finance. And again, most of it is grants-based, but we need to continually track that it's not going into loans or kind of pushing our countries into debt or pushing our countries to choose projects that would, let's say, generate a certain kind of return for banks so that we keep on paying our interest instead of the principal amount. We need to continually ask IFIs and countries in the global north to cancel debt, particularly accrued from fossil fuel projects, so that countries have the fiscal space to invest in jet. So, for example, if you've taken a loan for a coal project, you have to pay it back. So it's very hard to close that coal project when you have to pay back a loan. So we need to ask for debt cancellation that has funded fossil fuels. We need to dismantle global economic rules that privilege the interest of fossil fuel investors. We need to continually advocate very simply that we are against coal. We need no more new coal. ASEAN's net zero pledges should include a commitment to break this dependency on coal by ensuring that states will not build additional coal power stations. So it's not about closing the existing, it is about closing the existing ones up, but it's also kind of continually tracking that new ones are not built. And we need comparable support for RE. So fuel and electricity subsidies skew the electricity market and unfairly favor polluting technologies. Removing these subsidies, we're not asking for that because removing them could adversely affect the poor and undo SDG progress. So suddenly make electricity very expensive for everyone. So that's not what we are asking. We're saying that we need a similar subsidy and support for renewables to level the playing field for electricity developers and accelerate the deployment of renewable energy technologies. So most of it is from the study, and I'll be happy to take, I think there's no other slides, are there? I think that was it. And yeah, thank you so much for taking out the time. And I'm sorry if this is coming a bit premature, like after we've gone into the details, we're going into the bigger picture, but yeah, happy to take questions. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mira from Asia Feminist Coalition, for the insight. Your presentation really give me an insight that underscored the importance of a feminist just energy transition in Asia. That you also highlight the systemic inequalities and also the urgent that need to center women and marginalized groups in energy project. Okay, now as we approach to the end of the presentations, I'd like to thank all our speakers for their in-depth presentations, and we have many new insights about the challenges, the opportunities that ensuring a just energy transition. And at this point, I will open up the floor for the questions. Please feel free to type your questions in the Q&A box. You are also welcome to speak to give the questions by click raise hand button first, so our team could allow you to open the microphone. So let's begin our discussion. Okay, let me check the Q&A box first. We have three questions here. So I will move first to Riswati from Aceh. Okay, let me read the question. So Riswati are advocating for RPJMN or National Medium Term Development Plan 2025 until 2029 in her regions Aceh. The question is, how do they ensure that their regional plan can integrate just and inclusive transition policies? Riswati asked, are there any good practices from other countries that can be shared? Okay, thank you, Kak Riswati, for the questions. I think the one that's suitable to answer the questions is Nadia from Kami. I think I can give the screen to Nadia to answer the questions. Please, Nadia.
Hi, thank you so much for asking that really important question on bringing in regional perspective towards basically centering. I can't remember the name of the initiative. Can you repeat that again? The
Pardon?
Aceh. Can you repeat the name of the regional midterm development plan? Sorry, I just see on the Zoom. So it's a regional midterm development plan. So the same with Malaysia. We also have midterm development plans, or even we call it physical plans, that basically has its own cycle, and um, some of these regional plans, they really cover issues around land use, etc. And in some places, for example, in Malaysia, these land use, for example, plans are not is able to be planned on the regional aspect. That would mean either on the subnational aspect, on local, and also on the state level. So on the federal level, they are not is not able to assess this kind of information. So it depends on how governance around land is being structured, but that's how it is in Malaysia. Sorry if I have to just go a bit deep on that. But I think in terms of best practice, this is something that I do not, I can't say that I know. But however, from the work that I do in our own country, in Malaysia, we started off by engaging with the state officials on the agencies that work specific on energy transition and also land. And of course, speaking to some different agencies that work specific on climate adaptation and also mitigation at the subnational level. There's quite a number of them, but I felt what's really important to start off with is to ensure that the financing to these activities are already being determined. So I know that in Indonesia that you already have the climate budget tagging, also responsive, gender climate budget tagging, and I think that is a really critical place to start with, if I may say, if I may suggest, partly because it shows where the money is going, who's getting the money, etc., and to build evidence based on that at the local level and of course at the regional level. I think that would be the best a suggestion that I can give for now. But in other countries, I can't say that I know a lot about this, but from the work that I do in Malaysia, is just at the moment we are engaging with this different, bringing visibility to different subnational level government entities and also businesses, if I may say. Yeah. I hope that that answers, that
Thank
helps
you
a little
so
bit.
much. Thank you so much, Nadia, for the great answer. Okay. So in Malaysia, you start with engaging with state official, also speaking to the agency that focus on environmental, land, energy, and in subnational level, if I'm not mistaken. And you also suggest that we can start from the financing energy transition that is available in Indonesia now. Regarding to this, I think I want to invite Mbak Dwi from the Prakarsa, because you guys had study on about the financing energy transition in Indonesia. If you have like additional opinion or answer about this, please, you are welcomed here, Mbak Dwi.
Hello.
Yeah.
It's raining here, so I'm afraid the connection is a bit unclear. But yeah, related to the question about the regional development planning in Aceh, yeah, specific. So I think what Nadia explained earlier about how GSOs can strengthen themselves, also engage to the officials, the government officials, is important. But then when it's not about the financing, but probably I would like to say that it is also important for GSOs in Aceh as well, uh, including the women's organization, youth groups, or indigenous people, and also faith-based organization, yeah, to form alliance or coalition to strengthen the voices related to how this development planning document can also integrate the just energy transition. So I think based after forming an alliance or a coalition, um, the GSOs can also propose to the government officials to have like a consultation meetings. So um, probably this is an experience from Prakarsa as well on how we develop our policy recommendations that are evidence based. So it is important for the GSOs to provide evidence based and also gathering the women's voices, communities' voices related to how this is important, uh, how this is important to integrate the just energy transition into the development planning. So by for example, stories of women, voices of women about um, how the coal plants affect them, the communities live around the coal power plants live and impact their lives. And after that, leveraging media and also public campaigns is also important to amplify the voices of the women and also the communities. And for the financing part, I think probably it's not probably it is also important to raise an issue to have a climate budget taken from the APBD, from the regional budget plan. So yeah, I think the documents that provide the evidence also can provide how is the proposal from the communities, and how the integration of the regional budget to the regional development plan. So I know this is huge work. So it is also need capacity building, um, from, I don't know, from other GSOs, from LBH EPIC, for example, or other organizations that can also provide this, capacity building to the local GSOs in Aceh.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Dwi, for the answer. So, Mbak Dwi, state that we can refer to APBD. So it's our budgeting for the region that, but we remind that to us as well. And also we can also develop a recommendation with evidence base. I think that's these recommendations and the evidence base can like you can make it with Aceh best situations and condition as well. So it will more concentrated and specific to what Aceh condition right now that aligns with just energy transition that needed. So now we also have another question here in the Q&A box. I will move to uh, Bayu Wijaya. So Bayu asked, seeing that renewable energy industry is a type of male-dominated sector, what is the realistic practice that government and business can do that align with gender-responsive policies and principles? Okay, maybe I would like to offer this question to LBH Apik Mbak Imun to answer this question. Would you like to, Mbak Imun?
The question, sorry.
Okay. Okay, the question is from what Bayu Wijaya, seeing that renewable energy industry is really male-dominated sector. This is like also we found this in this presentation of yours and also Nadia. And what is the realistic practices that government and business can do that align with gender responsive policies and principles? Because we know there are many barriers that we face when we talk about renewable energy industry that male-dominated sector it is.
Yes, yes, I know. This is a very complicated answer, a question and answer, I think. But we know that Indonesia and maybe some of the countries already have like a roadmap, yeah, for just energy transition partnership, and then some of them also have like policies, yeah, related to the gender and climate and so on. So I think that's the opportunities to use. Also, we should strengthen the policy about that by the government, and they can also like a dialogue, more dialogue to the like investors and also business entities to talk about how to integrate it, the gender and social inclusion analysis there. Actually, in the CIPP, CIPP means Just Energy Transition Roadmap in Indonesia already include about women empowerment and inclusion, but in the reality, in the practice, this is still like only like still prioritizing about the technical approach and also the massive project, but not about how to explore the woman's perspective and modality to involved in the renewable energy or the just energy transition in Indonesia. So this is a problem. And as Nadia said that I think most of the countries still like a woman still difficult to compete with the because of in the gender in equal gender norm that cannot access more about the maybe STEM education, yeah, and so on and so on. It is also the problem. So it's about the policies, and it's also about the culture. I think it's two of this issue, this group, this issue is should be addressed. So so now from our perspective, from women's rights organization, should be now we should have a consciousness that this the energy transition is also our issue, because sometimes some of the women's organization or women feels like this is not our issue, this is our issue, and this is close to us. So we should also respond and voice, and also promote the business sector and government to recognize the woman's experience and need. So I think we should speak louder than before, as women's rights organization, and also you, maybe not only women, but we should together with men, yeah, also by you, maybe a man, so we can work together to promote and voice the woman's perspective, and so on. And also it's also we should also change, yeah, of course, the culture and so on, yeah, instead of culture and also the policy as well. So maybe that's my opinion.
Thank you so much, Mbak Imun, for the answer. I see Nadia raises her hand now. Maybe Nadia would like to answer the question.
Yeah, not really answering, but then just something that came to my mind. So in some of the work that we are doing, um, when we analyze or when we do a gender gap assessment, right? At organizational level or even at a certain entity, we realize even though if that particular organization or that institution has maybe 70% of leadership being led by women and 30% is by male. So I'm just this is just I'm not looking at the intersectionality just between these two main gender that there is. And there is a good chance that they will still do policy in a more in a gender blind um, perspective, partly because it does not guarantee having women to lead organizations at decision-making tables would also translate towards a betterment of women or sharing benefits, etc. Partly because there's no capacity, there's no understanding around what gender analysis really means, right? Well, what is gender, for example, and how gender analysis improves lives, not just the lives of women, but also men, persons with disability, children, elderly, youth, etc. So that perspective is not something that you can just reach when we have a lot of women in decision making. So I think that is that particular gap that I found quite common in many of conservation groups, at least in Malaysia. So, stating that renewable energy industry is a type of male-dominated sector, we also have to look into how renewable energy is being produced. So that would mean the upstream level and downstream level in terms of how renewable energy is being used, right? So just looking at just this a simple way of how we view renewable energy. I'm not talking about energy poverty, etc., but how in terms of this renewable energy is being produced and is being used, and they are being produced by a male dominating sector, but for most of the users that use this energy are probably women, right, in all its diversity. So that is an important statement here, because we also consider that to produce not just in terms of production where all the STEM technical jobs exist, but also the people who use this, right? how they can play a role in improving how they can use this energy, and how, for example, we talk about energy efficiency, how women can play a role in improving energy efficiency in households, etc. So there are different ways how to view how renewable energy is being sectored within male and female. And I believe these are just some of my suggestions that we can start off with, having conversations on this. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nadia, for the bold statement from you. So energetic, so really inspiring about this concern. I can see you really have a deep concern about this issue. And you remind me again about that we have to look again about the gender meaning itself, because it's commonly and have stereotype that gender is directly linked to women, and it is not. Like when we talk about gender, we also talk about marginalized group. We talk about this people with disability. We talk about indigenous people and so on. So this is also, I think this is our homework together to also give more narrative to the public about what is gender meaning, how the just energy transition has to be done by everyone, by every parties that's involved in the project. Thank you so much, Nadia, and thank you as well for the speaker here. And I remember that the Mbak Imun answer about the previous question that we have to work together to combat this issue about how we respond about this male-dominated sector in energy transition. That we work together, not only female, but we also work with male, with other parties, with other genders as well. And I think it's aligned with what Nini Lejana already typed here in Q&A box. I think I want to invite Nini Lejana, if Nini Lejana still here, to open mic, maybe to give the statement that you already stated here. If you are not, yeah, okay. Is that all right? Can the team help to Nini Lejana to open mic? Okay, I think
Well, I will skip the opportunity because I'm in the
okay.
middle of something. But I'm
All right,
listening.
thank you. Okay. Okay, thank you so much, Nilijana. So, please allow me to read your statement here in Q&A box. So, Nilijana stated that the risk of just energy transition is actually not much different from the case of development projects in general. And we see that it is because there are also many projects that being held in Indonesia and I think the Malaysia as well, that is not really see the gender perspective. And if I want to quote about Nadia's statement, the policies there are most of them are gender blind. And I also remember that Mbak Imun also stated that on the policy, we find that statement which government refers to they want to give attention to the gender responsive based policy or framework, but on the practice is still questionable, right? So you have great point in this, and the positive impacts will not occur in the principles of social justice and community rights are not met in the main foundation. So it's actually we, gender justice and indigenous peoples advocacy activists, who need to reflect and learn to make different efforts to achieve more success. Instead of just mainstreaming gender justice and indigenous peoples issues into discussions or efforts on just energy transition issues. So yeah, I think this is, if I can get reflections into the issues itself, like this is really, we need something new, like action or movement towards we, our activists, academies, about this issue, because just energy transition is completely different about just energy transition itself, we need just because we have to ensure that everyone here, everyone in community is being heard, their voice are matters, and also the practice is in line with the equality, just, and the human right past. So I saw this Mira Nerin is raising her hand. I would like to invite Mira to maybe give the opinion about this matter if you would like to.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I, in part, agree with the statement that was written. But then one thing that I see that it's a bit different is that we also have to keep our governments to account to actually transition and not just leave it at, which is why this is different from just looking at development projects alone, is to also look at the bigger picture around are we transitioning to renewable energies or not? Because the implication that I think the conversation that we continually need to bring in is the impact of climate on communities. So the impact of, let's say, heat, the impact of, disasters on communities, is to keep connecting the two, is something that we have to doing. And this is something that governments are often ignoring. They're looking at energy as just energy, like only energy, not the justice one, but as just only energy. Whereas this is has a huge link to climate, and continually bringing the voices that are vulnerable to climate change in this conversation is also equally important. So yes, it's on projects, but it's also on the bigger picture. And I just wanted to add a very small thing on like women in STEM. Is I think as a practical action is to also maybe look at women who would make good decision makers, is to kind of stand with them in a way. So I don't, again, looking out, see if they're, let's say, maybe someone who's at a director level, not at a very senior level in a government agency, who understands the language, and we can have, let's say, feminist conversations with them and make sure they're on board. So maybe championing is something that we need to do a bit more deliberately, and then looking at how promotions are made within decision making bodies, and then tracking. I know this is a very micro thing, but I think this is also like a very practical step which we know has worked for other kind of agencies, to be looking into that and then supporting the women who are, let's say, not given the same opportunities in leadership. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mira, for the statement. Yeah, I'm also agree with your statement. It is that I think we also have to take part to the national level, or maybe like the government level, to also participate ourselves, to give the voice, and maybe to see like the policy itself before it is being legal law that is implemented to the community. So I think next we have, I think this is the last questions, because we not have many time left. This is Artati Haris. I want to give Artati Haris a time maybe to give the questions directly to the speakers. If you can open your mic, you can ask the question directly to the speaker if you want to. Okay, Artati Haris, would you like to ask your question directly? Okay. All right, thank you so much. Please allow me to read your question. So Artati Haris asked about gender equality in the just energy transition is a huge and a complex issue that requires deep engagement. However, in many countries like Indonesia, government are still not prioritizing energy transition at the national level. Yeah. In this context, how can we effectively address gender equality issue in the energy sector? And what specific roles can civil society play to push the agenda forward? About this question first, I want to give the floor to Mbak Ika from Kalyana Mitra. Would you like to answer this question?
Okay. Thank you, Afida. So to answer this question, I think, in my opinion, involving women's organization from cross sectors and issues can be like the role that we can have, and also building the critically engaged with the government. And from the government from the government. Also, they need to hear more from the women's organization to share their opinion and also share their perspective regarding the women's needs and interests, so that the women's right can be involved or integrated in the energy transition policies. And the other one, that critically engage and demand the transparency of information in all discussion, process, and also the conversation around the energy transition. I think it is also important and essential as the role can play by the civil society, because building the critical dialogue with the like building the critical dialogue with the government and also the private sector will become a strategy and approach to ensure the integrated to effort to like integrating the gender justice and inclusion issue into the development planning, including in the energy transition. And the other one, I think the second question, that we all know that related to the just energy transition policies, there are many initiatives come from the community that is, in my opinion, it is important to support by the government and also by the like the philanthropy sector. So providing the financial support to the community initiative are also important. And there have been also many initiatives that developed by the women in the community, which show the leadership of women are also play the key role to answer the energy transition, bring like the justice that we want to achieve. And also, I think energy transition policy without addressing the gender inequality and injustice, then the policy will just double the gender inequality and injustice. So without integrating the JETC frameworks and approach in the policy, it will not benefit the women needs and other marginalized group. I think that my response. Thank you.
Thank you, Mbak, for the response of the questions. You also already answered the second questions by Artati. So thank you so much for that. And okay, so I think we already now in the last sessions of this webinar. Thank you all for such as vibrant and insightful Q&A sessions. I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks once again to all our speakers, Mbak Imun, Mbak Ika, Mbak Dwi, Nadia, and Mira, for sharing your expertise and perspective on this topic. But before we close, let me quickly recap on the key takeaways from today's webinar. We know that we have seen how critical it is to integrate women's perspective in all aspects of the energy transition, that our speakers also highlighted not only the disparities, but also innovative approach and policy recommendations that can ensure a more just and inclusive transition. From financing challenges, we'll not forget about that. It is clear that a holistic and gender responsive approach is necessarily needed. And from the Q&A sessions, I also know that there are many homeworks actually left to us, to our maybe our advocacy as activists. We also have to reflect within ourselves what we can do better to bring this issue to the public, so we can have more critical and impactful actions and movement about just energy transitions. So maybe I encourage everyone here to continue this dialogue beyond today's sessions. These insights are not only valuable for academic or policy formulations, but I think it is also a call to action for all of us who are working toward a sustainable and for making the inclusive future. So with that, I officially conclude the moderated portion of our event. Now I invite our MC back again, Kafebda, to take lead of this event. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Kak Afida, our wonderful moderator, for leading this session with an enjoyable and also meaningful way, of course. And thank you to all of our speakers. There is Mbak Imun from API, Kak Ika from Kalyana Mitra, Kak Dwi from the Prakarsa, Nadia from kami, and Mirah from Asia Feminist Coalition. And last but not least, thank you to all the participants who stayed with us for hours and remain engaged in this webinar. We truly appreciate your time and also the commitment. Kindly reminders for the participants who haven't filled out the attendance list, please to fill it through the link that we shared in the chat box. As we come to our end, as we come to the end of our today's webinar, me as MC and also on behalf of the organizers, we hope that today's discussion has sparked deeper reflections and also deeper engagement and knowledge how we can center women's perspective and women's voice and experiences in the just energy transition, both in Indonesia, Malaysia, and Asia as well. I also sincerely hope that this webinar will strengthen our solidarity as sisters across Asia to ensure that the just energy transition or the energy transition process itself becomes truly inclusive and also just for all, for women and for other marginalized groups. So by said that, thank you once again for your participation and see you in another discussion in the near future on in the next place. And hope you have a great day and great weekend. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good day.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you, Nadia. Thank you, Mira. Thank you, Kak Ika, Mbak Imun, dan Kak Dwi.